Hi, I'm DJ Ware. On this episode of the Cyber Gizmo, I'm going to be looking at Haiku OS. This is the third release of the beta, which is just about 5 days ago, right after this. So the Haiku project, actually, and I want to thank the project team for sending me a press release. That was very nice of them. And released the third beta of their system. And what I understand is according to their notes on their website, is they are planning a beta 4 release and then probably will move to their first release candidate. And this has been a long time baking. I mean, the team is definitely moving forward at a more quick pace because last year was the beta 2, and before that, I think it was several years before they actually between release 1, beta release 1, and also this one. So, yeah, it's been a long road, and looks like we're coming close to having a release version of Haiku. But let's talk a little bit about what is it. So Haiku means it's a short 3-line poem in Japanese, is what that means. And the name was given to this release because it is actually a spiritual successor to BeOS. BeOS, of course, is not defunct. I have read on Wikipedia it says it's defunct. It is not defunct. It is still actively in use. But we'll talk a little bit about why that happened. So Haiku is a free and open source operating system that is compatible with, now I haven't discontinued BeOS officially. I don't think you can find an ISO file for BeOS anymore, but it is supported by the Haiku Inc. It's a nonprofit organization based in Rochester, New York. Haiku was founded in 2003 by the former project leader Michael Phipps, and of course they have a full team that works on Haiku today. So what the heck was BeOS? So Jean-Louis Gasset was a member of the Apple computer team originally, and at some point he left Apple, and one of the things that he wanted to work on was the new operating system, and so he began putting together a project team to create BeOS, which was really meant to be a successor to the macOS, which was currently in use at the time at Apple. He had hoped to be able to sell and license that back to Apple, but I think the negotiations broke down somewhere along the way. Apple thought that actually did consider buying BeOS at one point, but they felt that the purchase price of BeOS was not the right direction, and I don't remember what all the costs were, but they at that point they decided to go with Next and purchase that system and that operating system and also the hardware, as well as getting Steve Jobs to return to the company. So yeah, so BeOS was an operating system designed initially to run on AT&T's Hobbit-based hardware. Now that was based on CRISP, and CRISP is a reduced instruction set, which is based around, it's sort of intended to be a one-for-one. Whatever C code I use, I get one instruction out in machine code. So it was really meant to be a very efficient processor to run C. And that was based on the C machine from Bell Labs. It was optimized, obviously, for running C. It was later ported to the PowerPC. The Hobbit just didn't pan out. AT&T they were wanting to co-develop for the Hobbit, and they wanted more money, and yeah, that just broke down. It just didn't work out. So they went on. So the BeOS team went on to market to create a version for the PowerPC, and that ran on what was called the B-Box, which is shown here. I don't have any photographs of the Hobbit, but it was kind of a laughable machine. It was I remember it. I just don't remember seeing any photos of it. There was some photos of a later version called the EO, or I think short for Executive Office or something. But I'm sure somebody will correct me. But yeah, it was kind of a joke. It was like, oh, I could receive faxes on the beach. But But yeah, it was kind of silly. But the B-Box was really a very successful implementation of BeOS, and later on they ported the BeOS to x86 platforms, and it was able to run on Pentium and Pentium 4 hardware. So yeah, it was, and then it was sold to Palm. Palm wanted to use it as a possible replacement for their Palm OS. It was about that time that Open BeOS formed, and Palm said, hey, this is a, they contacted them and say, hey, you have a possible conflict of interest here. You're violating our trademark, and the Haiku, and then Haiku was born as a offshoot of that to replace the name Open BeOS. BeOS was sold again to Access Company, and I think that's where they are right now. They're still over there. BeOS continues to be used today. It is used in the Roland Ederol DB7. It's a video editor, which is shown here. Tune Tracker radio automation software in 2015 switched to using Haiku, but originally were BeOS. Tascam SX1 digital audio recorder runs a heavily modified version of BeOS. Radar 24, Radar 5, and Radar 6. Those are 24-track professional audio recorders, and those are based on BeOS as well. There's also Magic Box and Final Scratch, which run versions of BeOS. So yeah, it's still used. It's just not in the personal computing side of things. We talked about that, where they were notified of a trademark infringement in 2004. But the real first milestone for Haiku was the release of R1 Alpha 1 in November of 2012. The R1 Beta 1 was released 6 years later in September of 2018, and 2 years later the second beta was released, and of course that was last year, and now we have release 3. Haiku, what is it? Haiku is an operating system that's written in C++. It is a modular design, which means it is possible to develop components in relative isolation. That is, I don't need to have a full setup of Haiku to develop for it. I can develop my pieces and then send it to the build, and then it can then be built up from there. It is the components that form Haiku, and you will see this when you install packages, is that the services or servers and the API layer are combined and form what they call Kit. Haiku is a modular hybrid kernel, so it's neither a monolithic, but it is based on, it is based on new OS. Haiku supports many features, including a virtual file system. If you want to know more about that, I have a video on the Linux kernel internals that talks about virtual file systems and what they're for. Also, the symmetrical multiprocessing system is supported, as well as the POSIX thread model is supported as well. There's a package management system that has a GUI called the Haiku Depot. There's also a command line called PKG man, I believe it is, M-A-N, PKG MAN, which you can then access from the command line. If there is a shell, which is based on Bash, although it does not have any actual Bash code in it, it does provide an environment that, if you use Linux or Unix very much, you'll find a lot of the same commands work, like ls and copy, and some of those all work because they're POSIX. Those are POSIX standards, and so yeah, because they're POSIX compliant, those still work. Haiku reimplements both the BeOS technologies as well as the user experience. So it is trying to provide a code-compatible environment, both source code and binary code that was compiled for BeOS. So it does not include any code from the original BeOS project except for two pieces. One of them is the tracker, and the other is the desk bar, and the only reason why those are included is because they were open source to begin with. So yeah, so it aims to be compatible with BeOS at both the source and the binary level, like I said. Software written for BeOS can run without modification on Haiku, which is good news. I mean, that makes it easier for things to run if you can find applications that are around for that. There are a number of applications which run Opera, Firefox. There's something called Net Positive. There's also, of course, some games, Quake 2 and 3. SeaMonkey will work. Vision will run, and of course, the VLC does too. There's also implementations of LibreOffice and some of, and I think. I think there's also some video converter utilities which are around as well. We'll go through that when we go into the demo. So what's new in the release 3? I mean, we've talked a little bit about kind of what Haiku is and what BeOS was, but what's new with Beta 3? So first of all, they've added support for 28 new languages. Now, that makes it more available to more countries throughout the world, so that's good news. There's also new improvements too. Now, they use WebKit as the basis for the browser, which they call Web Positive. Now, there were some performance issues with Web Positive in the past. I remember seeing some of those where it would even crash on certain HTML pages, but I haven't tested this extensively, so I can't tell you if it's better or not, but they have made improvements to try to resolve some of those issues. So there is a new and improved installation process. There were some bugs in the drive setup GUI, and they have done some fixes around that. There's also improvements to device drivers, such as the Wi-Fi networking they brought in to match the same drivers that FreeBSD 13 has. Also, they've added additional improvements for audio drivers, mass storage, and USB. And of course, it does support modern drives such as NVMe, SSDs. It does support all of those. Better performance on NVIDIA graphics cards. I know that's an upward battle even for Linux to try to get better performance on NVIDIA cards because of the closed nature of the drivers. The software updates now can be resumed if there's an interruption. Maybe you had a system outage, maybe you stopped it prematurely. In the past, you would have had to start all over again with a new install, but that's not the case anymore. There's new and updated ports of various software as well. So they have deprecated Python 2 just like everyone else has. And so now Python 3 is the default. There is greater POSIX compatibility. There's a lot of bug fixes in this release. And if you're interested, I will add some links in the description of this video. So if you're interested in becoming a developer or even a volunteer, they're certainly looking for those. And if you're interested in helping out, I'm sure they'd be glad to have you. Haiku has versions for both x86 32-bit and 64-bit. Now, I went out to the Wikipedia and it said there was also versions for ARM and RISC-V. It may be possible to compile on those two chips, but I did not see any pre-built systems for that. So I'm not going to dispute Wikipedia. I don't know if those are actually there or not, but I did notice that on the Haiku OS project website, there are only downloads for 32-bit and 64-bit Intel or x86 architectures. 32-bit requires a Pentium or better CPU, so just about anything modern would run just fine on it. It only requires 256 MB of memory. They do recommend 512, however. Otherwise, you will definitely be hitting your virtual drive, your virtual file system for swap. And it does require 1.5 gigabytes of disk storage to bring up an initial release, as well as a Visa compliant graphics card. Now, Visa compliance is great, but it's going to force you into specific, well-known graphics resolutions. So, I mean, that is the nature of Visa. So if that doesn't bother you, and great. I mean, you can still get to HD and you can get to 4K with it. So the recommended, however, is for a Pentium 4 or better. Again, I don't think that's going to be a problem. 512 MB of RAM, we talked about that already, and 2 gigabytes of storage. So again, you need a Visa compliant storage. Now I'm going to put this, they do recommend going to 4 gigabytes of storage. So I'll be doing I'll probably put it on my usual 32 gig. I have my system set up so it doesn't use it. It doesn't allocate it. So, is Haiku Linux? No, it is not Linux. It doesn't use the Linux any. Well, it does use some GNU-based software. So you will find some GNU-based utilities in there, such as the GNU CCC compiler. And we'll find some various utilities that do come from the Free Software Foundation. But you will not find a Linux kernel. Like I said, it's based on its own kernel that was fashioned after New OS. Unlike Linux, Linux uses a stack of software. So in order for me to build up a Linux release or a distribution, I have to have, if I want a desktop environment, I have to have a kernel, I have to have X Windows, or Wayland, and I have to have some kind of desktop environment. Then I need all my development toolkits if I'm going to be doing any kind of development on the system. I might have a need for multiple package managers, but you've got that depending upon which distro you're using, such as Arch, Pacman, Debian is APT, Red Hat will be RPM. And then you have multiple package managers underneath that in order to manage, like DNF, APT, you have TinyDNF, you have RPM. So yeah, there's just a ton of differences on Linux that builds up a source. Haiku doesn't work like that at all. Haiku is a single focus, single vision of a personal computing environment. So they're driven by a unified vision of the whole OS. So you'll find applications that are written for KDE in Haiku. You'll find applications that are written to run under GNOME. And the interesting thing about Haiku is that because of the kit architecture and the way they install packages, they don't do any kind of package linkages until the package linkage until you actually go to install the package that you're trying to download. And at that time, it makes a determination of what it needs, and it brings in those packages as required. So, yeah, Haiku's kind of interesting and kind of unique in that. Yeah, it'd be kind of nice if Linux would do that, because it seems like we always run into dependencies which are out of date, too old, not compatible with the one that somebody else installed. So, Haiku is licensed under the MIT license. Now, some people will find that is good and bad. I know that the Free Software Foundation would prefer. They don't criticize MIT license, but I think because of some of the language in the MIT license, they would kind of prefer an Apache license for this, or of course their own. But yeah, so they don't really say, we're not approving this because it's an MIT license. However, on the Free Software Foundation, they have such strict outlooks on what they consider free and open source. So this statement is pretty typical. It says, Haiku includes some software that you're not allowed to modify, which of course violates their whole purpose. So it also includes non-free firmware blobs, and of course that's an immediate non-approval when they see that. So yeah, and you're going to find that in any system that is deploying any kind of packages which have codecs or what have you, or play MP3 files or even MP4 movies. So yeah, you're going to find that you're going to have non-free components in there. The only alternative is you don't get to run those. So anyway. So I guess let's take a look and kind of see what's all involved here on installing this, and then we'll come back and I'll give you kind of some of my final thoughts on what I think of Haiku R1 Beta 3. Just the one thing, keep in mind when you're working with beta software, a beta product means that I have all the features that I'm going to include in this release coded, but I don't necessarily have them all tested. Now, they go through different releases of beta software in order to retest areas that might have found had major bugs, and they need additional testing. So you might see even a release 5 of beta is possible. They have planned release 4, but they haven't. I think what they're hoping is that release 4 goes well and they can go to a full up release. So, but it doesn't preclude them from going to a release 5. If they find major bugs in release 4, it's possible they may schedule a release 5. You never know. That's just the way it works, and it's good. We prefer software that works. Having software that crashes on us, it's not a fun thing. So I always appreciate a development track that does not care about timelines. They care about quality of the code. Yeah. All right. Let me go get set up, and I'll be right back. So the first place you're going to want to go is out to the Haiku website, and it is www.haiku-os.org. And on that page, you will find a number of things you can look at. So you'll find some frequently asked questions. You'll find a slideshow that'll kind of go through some of the features with you. There's a user guide, and then there's all kinds of other guides for like developers and all those things. Although you'll find, and we'll get to that, but you'll find a lot of these manuals are already on the system when you deploy them. So there's an installation guide. There's some release notes about what's new, and then if you need some additional help, want to ask questions or get involved, you can do that. You can also submit a donation if you want to help support the project. And then, yeah, so where do we go? Well, we probably need to go right there. Go to the download. So it talks about that there's currently a very small set of developers, and there's some, that's good and bad, right? I mean, it's good from the standpoint that if it's a small team, then things get done without a lot of overhead in managing it. But it also means you can't do as much work and it gives us a lot of time. So, yeah, it's a good and bad thing. So right here for me, there's all kinds of them. There's Amsterdam, there's one in New York, there's one in Oregon, there's one in Stockholm, Sweden, there's one in Russia. So you pick the mirror that's closest to you and then pick, do I want a 32-bit ISO or a 64-bit? There's also torrents down here. If you want the checksums, they're here. And also cryptographic servers. You can also some information about how to upgrade it if you're on beta release 2. But we're not going to do that. We're just going to go over here, and then it'll ask me to download this, and I would save that file. It's not a big download. In fact, it's already done. It's 719 megabytes. So, yeah, it's not a very big download. So at that point, I would then put this over onto my NAS drive, and then, which I've already done, so we don't have to do that again. I, as you can see, have installed it to play around with it and get familiar with this release. But anyway, we'll go ahead and set this up. This is, we'll call this Haiku 2. Of course, my ISO image is over on my NAS, and we will find that. Yeah, it's right there. This is a couple of days old, so there might be patches now on the release that's there. I doubt it, but there might be. I don't need to do anything with this. I have not tested Spice, so I'm not sure if that'll work or not. The system I was running on doesn't really support Spice very well, but this one does. I could try it. Let's try it. If it craps out, we'll just try something else. I know there's been some issues in the past with multiple monitors in Haiku, but this is only a single, and that shouldn't be a problem. Yeah, I don't think we'll put this on my cluster. I think we'll put this on the local storage. I'm going to leave it at 32 because, again, I never know. I might play with this for a while. Now, I could get by with just 2. It's not CPU heavy. It's not memory heavy either. You'll see that. And then for the network, I am going to use Intel again because I just prefer that. And I have been doing that for all the distributions that I've looked at so far this year. So it's building out. And we'll wait for it to finish. It's done. And then we'll start it up, and we'll go ahead and launch the console, and I'll open the remote viewer, and we'll see what happens here. Yeah, that looks good so far. Now, Haiku comes up in kind of a live environment, so yeah, it's going to say you can stick around here, you can just try it out, or you can install it. We're going to install it. And then the first question I'll ask you is what key map and what language you want as your default, and then those are fine. Some information about, yeah, you're using a beta software. I am not using this on hardware. I'm using this on virtual machines. You can run into some issues with serial ports from the documentation that I've read, and they do give you some information about how to deal with that. So if you don't like that, and then it says, oh, I don't have a partition I can install on, so please go set one up. All right, so we'll do that. And of course, it's not going to show me a target until I do that, but it will show me some optional packages here that I can go through and install, or say, nah, I don't really need those, but those look fine. We'll leave those, and we'll go ahead and set up our partition. So there's my QEMU drive, and there's my DVD drive that we're using. We don't want to touch that because then we wouldn't be able to install anything. So I'm just going to format that as a B file system, and I am right-clicking. I'm right-clicking on this. I'm selecting file on the BeOS. If you want a partition, you, of course, would need to set up some additional partitions to do that. But I'm just going to format the whole drive as BFS. Are you sure you want to format a raw disk? Most people initially, yes, I know. But I don't think I need to worry about that. I am under a VM, so enable query support allows you to speed up the search process to look for files across the drive. So we'll do that. We'll go ahead and write the changes out. And it says I'm done. It says I have a B file system, and so we can go ahead and close this up. Now I should have this as a target, and I do, and I can start the install. It's very fast, as you can see. It does not take long. And then we'll restart, and we'll see just how big of a mess I just created here. And it is running. It's generating SSH keys. There isn't a built-in SSH server, so you have both client and server support, which is nice when you're in a development environment, or if you're working remotely, you can do that. So the next thing we really need to do here is we need to set up the size of our window here. This is kind of nasty, so let's go do that. I think that's in preferences, and there should be one for screen, and that's where you need to go for that. This is, by the way, this is the desk bar. This is where you have the little feather, is where you will find information about, there are replicants, and we'll talk about those. It's been a while since I've used BeOS, so this is kind of nice to take a trip down memory lane. I haven't used it since, I think, the 90s, when it was actually BeOS, and I forget the version. It might have been version 3, might have been version 4, but it's been a long time ago. And then you have some demos, some applications, and we'll go through all those. Here you also have like some information about, I can look at my memory usage, I can look at my threads, I can look at what processors. I think you can actually engage those or turn them off dynamically, which is kind of interesting. I do remember times where we did this in order to benchmark systems. So like I had a machine that had 4 processors, and I was benchmarking it against a 2 CPU machine. I could cripple the 4 processors so that I could see how much faster just on the 2 cores it would be, or whatever. There's also a power saving mode, and then there's a new terminal here that you can go to if you want. I don't think it actually turns off the processor. I think all it does is just says don't use it to load anything on it. Don't do anything with it. There is, though, so I guess the first thing we need to do here is find the updates, since that's what I always do. And so there's an activity monitor. Let's do that first. And you'll see this is my memory, 264 megabytes. Is all I'm using. CPU is not being heavily used right now, of course, because there's nothing going on. These little icons right here are the replicants. So what are those? So if I click on this and drag it out, you'll notice that a dotted, I don't know if you can see that, but a dotted line comes around, dotted box comes around. If I drop it, that can then sit on my desktop, and I can move that around by grabbing this replicant pointer right here. and put it anywhere on the desktop I want. Now I can just get rid of this. So yeah, no matter what, that's going to sit on my desktop running. So it's kind of an interesting thing. It's not available in all applications, but you know, a lot of the cool ones that you would probably want to use, it is. So anyway, let's go back here to be nice if Linux had something like that, wouldn't it? Oh wait, they do, but it's kind of nasty. So do I want to send anonymous usage? Yeah, I probably should, because this is beta, and it's probably good to let them know, hey, I had a problem downloading something, it blew up, or whatever. So right now it's building out my list. I'm not doing an update yet. Because you don't update the system here. I could go get that and let that happen as well. It's the software updater, so we'll go ahead and put that over here. And it did find some updates. So let's go ahead and let it do that. There's 28 updates. This will take some time as it brings down each package that is updated. I will speed this up for you. One thing it did mention was there might be some performance problems under a VM. They recommend using the VMware virtual managers for this. It seems to work pretty well on theirs, but let's see what happens after I reboot, get the updates actually applied, and then I will adjust my screen size, which I didn't do. I said I was going to do it and I didn't. So you'll notice my replicant comes back, so those are they will persist, but the applications that we're running do not. And there might be a way to start those up automatically. I'm sure there is. Let's see. Let's go to preferences and to the screen down here. And we'll go ahead and set this up to, I'm just going to make this 720p for today. That's fine. Yeah, it's fine. It's good. It's all good. Well, maybe. Maybe. Oh. Oh, there it goes. There it goes. That went back already. So maybe it doesn't like that. I had this, yeah, somebody wrote me and said, if you do this, you won't have this problem. So let me take this down to 24 and see if it likes that a little better. Yeah, it does. Okay. So yeah, we'll leave it at that. That's probably fine for now. And these are fully movable. This is your closed box, and then you can create workspaces on these as well if you want, and then how big those are going to be, of course. All right, let's go check out a couple of other things. So you have ubiquitous. Now you have this is a PDF reader. There's your character mapping. There is some tools that you can download which will allow you to assign hotkeys to applications if you prefer to do that. I think it's called, and then there's also all kinds of applications to help you do things like code in HTML. There's a full development environment. There's Vim. I did not have any luck getting LibreOffice to install, though it is offered. It failed during the installation process. I was going to try it now and see if I can get it to run again, so we'll try that. But there's the disk probe if you want that. There's my master device, and we'll go ahead and look at that. Can actually look at what is going on with my drive. I wouldn't recommend modifying that if I were you, but yeah. And then there's also disk usage, which we've kind of seen before in this kind of format here. Even on Linux, we've seen that. All right, so let's go down to Haiku. There's expander. I'm not sure what that is. Might be a file expander. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and do this again. It's going to resync the repositories. And then it will give me a list of packages. And since it's looking at all packages, I can then control what I want to look. There's audio, business, development, education, games, graphics, productivity. So let's look at video. And there's VLC. I don't know if, oh, Handbrake is here. Okay, so if I installed this, it's got pretty high ratings. So we'll go ahead and install it. That's probably going to take a while because VLC uses GStreamer. It uses, it uses all of the, well here, Tag Live, Live DVD. There's just a pile of packages that it uses. FLAC, X264, X265. Yeah, there's just a ton. Just a ton. So we'll go ahead and install that. It'll probably take a while to do that one. So I guess while that's going on, I'm just going to slip that over here to the background somewhere. And then I'll go ahead and bring up a terminal window because there's some things I would like to see. Okay, so so you'll notice I'm in a bash shell. I can use the mod key, which is the alt key on my machine, and then do an equal, and that should, if I'm in the window, should zoom in a little bit. You'll notice I have an ls command, and it gives me the POSIX permissions like it does under Linux. You'll also find a very similar, there's a bin, boot, dev, etc. Yeah, it kind of looks like a Linux environment, doesn't it? But all that's because of POSIX. If you look at the directory, you'll probably see a very familiar password, group, shadow, yeah. Term cap, oh my God. No, not term cap, run away. So, yeah, I see get is on here. Flex is on here. It's got, probably has a full development environment installed. One thing I do want to get while I'm here, though, I'm going to get a MP4 movie that's open source so that I can test this when it gets installed. Test VLC. It's still working on it. And then you do have a file manager if you prefer to do things that way. You can, just like anything else, you can open with. Now I'm going to wait on this because that one, the codec, is actually part of the package list that needs to be on here. So I'll be back. It looks like it finished up successfully, so I will go ahead. Now, one of the things you can do here, I changed this, but I was over here on the list view. But if I'm in the icon view, I can use my modifier key, the alt key, and I can make those larger as well. If I need that to be, those also will work. That also works. VLC, and then we'll open up the file. Or we'll try dragging and dropping it. How's that? Yep. So that is, and we'll get rid of, so VLC works. There are quite a few packages here. See what we got for audio. Army Knife, Stream Radio, Audacious, Clementine, Handbrake is under audio. Well, I guess, yeah, I guess that makes sense. It does do conversions. A bunch of MP3 players, business development. Nothing. Development, we have Arduino, Paladin, KDev, Qt Creator. Yeah, quite a few. I want to see what's, let's see what product to Calibri, Caligara. That is a KDE application. This one I did not have any luck installing. It crashed in the middle. And then video. So, yeah, you can also come down here and do a list or on the, but you probably have to give it a name. Let's do a search, and we'll do, let's do, wait a minute, let's do NFS. Let's see if that's here. Well, part of the supporting infrastructure is here, but I don't see NFS proper. Let's see what version of the compiler we have. If I type it right, it'll probably tell me 8.3. Couple of major releases behind, but not, that wouldn't bother me. That's fine. This, by the way, is also a POSIX command, uname. So it'll show you this kernel was compiled August the 2nd. So yeah, that's pretty recent. I would say that's pretty recent. So yeah, let's see. We'll do it up here. 5 gig is just to get an idea of how it's performing on this machine. The famous GLT pot. How fast can you spin me? 800 FPS, 700. It's going so fast it's hard to read. Between 7 and 800 FPS. That's probably faster than I need GL to work. And then there is, yeah, we've got to do Mandelbrot's. Let's see. Let's see what pellets we have for it. That's a nice one. And then we can zoom in a little bit. Yeah, not bad. The famous programs to run in the 90s, right? All right, so I think that's kind of my look at it. If I mean, you have, I think there are some limitations on the number of email packages you have that work with different external email providers. One thing I did not do, though, and maybe I should, is bring up this. And that's going to default to their page first. This is the browser. You can install Firefox. I think I did say that. And you can install that if you wish instead of using this one. But yeah, the WebKit, you'll probably find you'll run into some issues with compatibility on different websites. The good news is it may break the ads on some of them. Anyway, that's all I had. I'll come back and give you kind of what my final thoughts are. We'll go ahead and shut this down. It's not real heavy on resources, I will tell you that. It seems to be kind of, yeah, the look and feel is kind of dated, but that, that's, you kind of want that, don't you? I mean, if you're looking for a BeOS experience, then yeah, I would think that's what you would kind of want. As far as functionality, I don't know if I could use this as a daily driver. I could certainly give it a try. And I don't like to put beta software on hardware because it's kind of unfair. It may run into issues with compatibility on drivers. Until I get a full set of specs and I really know, what I need to run this on, I could probably play around with it and see how well it works with. So, I mean, my graphics cards, I have a 3070. That's, yeah, I don't know how well that's going to work. We'll find out, I guess. And then it's an AMD system on top of that. So I don't know how tied into the x86 architecture it really is. There are variances that could cause some issues. So I guess probably I could try it out and see. But as far as my impressions on it, it's they said it wouldn't run very fast under KVM, and of course Proxmox is a KVM-based system. It seemed to be responsive to me. I didn't really see that it was sluggish or slow in any way, other than the fact that the way the packages download, and I've seen that even on other people's demos where those take some time to run. So I'm not really all that concerned with that. It's just, it is what it is, and that's how it works. As far as an operating system that I could live with, it has the utilities that I would use. Yeah, it has everything that I would use on it. So I don't know, maybe give it a try and see. I hope you enjoyed this today. If you did, please like and subscribe. And I cannot run my tests. I can't check HTOP. I can't check NeoFetch. I can't check Linus. I did try to run Linus, and Linus blows up immediately saying, I don't know what this operating system is, but I am not familiar with it at all. So it just gives up and quits. HTOP, I did not see an installer for, although that could be compiled, and the same with NeoFetch. NeoFetch is a script, so it's possible that one might run, but I haven't actually tried that yet. So let me know in the comments below what you find out about it if you try it out. I would love to hear that. If again, if you like this, what you saw today, please like and subscribe. Hope to see you all again real soon, and bye for now.